So we were talking about multi-ordinal levels of self and the myth of self-worth or self-esteem. I wanted to, I should have said, so I'll say now, a few words about the notion of the infinite value or the infinite worth of human life. You hear this very often, this expression, especially from generals who are sending people to die in the battle. No, it's true. I'll never forget Colin Powell when he was introducing the first Gulf War, saying something like, well, of course every human life is infinitely precious, and yet, they gotta die. So, and you hear this a lot, like with the bagpipes, when someone dies in a Canuck, dies in Afghanistan, a glorious Canuck, and you hear those bagpipes yet again. Often you'll hear about the infinite value of every human life. Well, okay, we could say that it's maybe hypocritical, or maybe it's not hypocritical, I don't know. What I'm criticizing is not, in this instance, militaristic hypocrisy, if that's what it is. What I'm criticizing is the use of the term infinite. Because the term infinite, I think it's okay to go on using this term, as long as we understand that by infinite we don't mean very, very, very large. Yes. Which is usually the way we take a term like infinite. We take it as a quantitative term, I think. So I think it would be better not to use the term, but if you're going to use it, then if we're going to use it, then we should know that what we want to mean by it is beyond quantification of any kind. So when we say infinite, we shouldn't mean a very, very big quantity. We should mean beyond quantification altogether, having nothing to do with quantification. So if we say that every life is infinitely valuable, then I would like that expression to point to the inconceivability of the self, because that's what the self is at the object level, inconceivable, as we were discussing last time. And in this way we will be able to recuperate perhaps the use of the term infinite or infinitely in order to underline the futility or insanity of all attempts to assess the value of a person, to assess, quantify, rate the value or worth of a person. Just on radio the other day, I heard someone, I guess it must have been Gian Gomeshi, talking about the premature death of a singer named Hayden Neal at the age of 39. I've never heard of Hayden Neal. How many of you have? Okay. All right, so he's known to some extent, at least to some, and we don't like it when someone dies at 39. We sort of take that harder than when someone dies at 109. Well, that's okay, I suppose, but what Gian, if it was Gian, was saying was, he was raising this question: why are some of the best taken away so soon? And I thought, did I hear that right? And I repeated it in my mind, and sure enough, that's what he said. Why are some of the best taken away so soon? And I thought to myself, well, I thought maybe I was exaggerating when I translated relative worth of a human life, or relative value of a human life, into the notion of deserving to live, the degree of deserving to live. And I was saying that if you really think you're a worthless piece of shit, you feel that you don't deserve to live, and you start planning your suicide, at least in your imagination. And on the other hand, if you think that your life is infinitely worthy in the qualitative, quantitative sense, you're not going to have suicidal ideation, all other things being equal. But then I thought, hey, maybe I'm not exaggerating at all. Maybe this little peep from the collective unconscious demonstrates exactly that That the whole notion of the worth of human life is tied to the idea of whether people deserve to live or not. And so now, further along the same lines, I was talking last time about the local defense lawyer Stephen Surka, who was attacking the victims' rights legislation and practices that have taken hold in Canadian criminal justice. And I brought one other example, a couple of other examples to discuss there in order to reinforce the idea, or perhaps to clarify what it is that we're talking about here. This is from the Globe, May 15th, 1996. But there's no direct quotes because I lost my little clipping. So I wrote down a paraphrase of it, but it is from that issue of the Globe. Someone named J. Frazee, F-R-A-Z-E-E, in a letter to the editor, responds to a letter or an article in a previous issue of the Globe from a person born with severe facial deformities. So here we have someone who, remember I was talking about, I raised the question, is a person with less of a person? Is a person with more of a person? And I was arguing that those less and more apply to all characteristics of a person, not just material characteristics. Well, here we're dealing, I guess, with a material characteristic, and that is beauty. I guess we could say is a material characteristic, maybe not. So severe facial deformities indicates something that is unbeautiful, at least in E prime, something that many or most human beings will experience as unbeautiful. See what E prime will do for us there? But anyway, born with severe facial deformities, well, this already presupposes some evaluation of what is a deformity as opposed to a non-deformity. What is severe as opposed to non-severe, but we let that go. I mean, I'm not going to pick on that. In terms of a certain cultural context, I think we might all agree, for whatever that's worth, on what is or is not severe facial deformity. But this person wrote a letter to the Globe who was protesting the denial of his or her right to take his or her own life. Here she was saying she was born with severe facial deformities and she's had a miserable life as a result. And not from the physical aspect per se, but from being treated disrespectfully by others all her life long. I guess she was a woman. She's called dumb and stupid, etc., etc., etc. So she's saying, all my life long, because of my severe facial deformity, people have called me dumb and stupid and treated me disrespectfully. And so she wants to kill herself, and yet that would be illegal. If you're caught trying to kill yourself, the penalty could be capital punishment. Mainly, we're not supposed to allow people, we're not supposed to assist them. Often. Now, Frazee, in the letter that I found there, responding to this person, Frazee asserts that the main struggle of such people is a battle to have their intelligence recognized. Obviously, she says she was hurt by being called dumb and stupid, not by being called ugly. So Frazee is saying she wants to have these people want to have their intelligence recognized. Therefore, her will to die, or her apparent will to die, could very well be a cover for the feeling of worthlessness that is not deserving to live. Frazee wonders what would happen to the suicidal impulse in a society which treated everyone with respect. Well, that's a very good question. What would happen to the suicidal impulse in a society which treated everyone with respect? But he's also arguing that we shouldn't be so quick to grant the wish of people to die for reasons like this, because that would divert, Frazee argues, that would divert energy from the battle to construct such a society into a campaign for legalizing suicide for all sorts of reasons. Now, believe it or not, I have nothing to say on one side or another of any of these issues, except that it would be a good idea to construct a society which treated everyone with respect. Aside from that, I have nothing to say about any of the other issues that are raised here. What I want to draw to your attention is that what Frazee leaves out is the question of more specifically, what he leaves out is the question of disrespect for people who really are of very low intelligence, whatever that means. In other words, practically everyone who's involved in this issue in the globe, in the exchange of letters, is playing the game of, well, you're not totally worthless because you are good at some things. You may be ugly, but you're also very intelligent. So we can help you with your problem by recognizing that although you are ugly, you are also intelligent, and therefore, go with that. So if we stop calling them dumb and stupid, then we'll be recognizing their intelligence, and that's some kind of a solution. But I raise the question, well, what if they are very low intelligence? And could evoke the unkind epithets, dumb and stupid. Is someone, let's just use the words. If I'm dumb and stupid, if I'm ugly and dumb and stupid, does that mean that I'm not somebody? These are painful words, comrades. I may have severe facial deformities, but I am intelligent? Is that going to be the truth? No. I think we want to get to a place where someone can say, I may have severe facial deformities, and I am of extremely low intelligence by all social criteria, and I am somebody. Okay, good. I have nothing, and I am somebody. I possess nothing, and I am somebody. I don't possess beauty, I don't possess intelligence, I don't possess nothing. I've got plenty of nothing, and nothing's plenty for me. Well, this is one reason I call it radical general semantics, because I believe that at this moment I'm taking it to the root, and I'm making a connection between a study of human evaluation and the question of equality and democracy. And here's another example. And then maybe I'll leave you alone and stop talking about this stuff. Here's someone who writes a letter to the editor objecting to the use of the word retarded. She writes, my sister is also funny and beautiful and sensitive and adorable and retarded. So there's a nice use of the etc. to do some work here in this situation. She's writing, she has no objection whatsoever to the use of the term retarded. Her sister is retarded, but she's also funny and beautiful and sensitive and adorable. There's absolutely no better term than retarded to sum up her mental and physical abilities because her development in both areas is slow. Calling retarded people retarded does not strip them of their dignity. So a previous letter writer who had argued that the term should not be used should not be offended. It's this ridiculously defensive attitude held by people who should know better that has made the proper use of the word retarded so taboo. Sarah F. Now you can guess what I'm going to say. I'll tell you what you would guess. You would guess that I'm going to say, and what if this retarded person was not also beautiful, and not also sensitive, and not also adorable? What then? It's like the rabbi says in A Serious Man. Have you seen the movie? You should see the movie, it's very funny. But anyway, in this movie, the rabbi is quoting, what's the group that he's quoting?
Jefferson Airplane.
He's quoting Jefferson Airplane, a famous song by Jefferson Airplane, which has the lyrics. So when all the things that you thought turn out to be lies, and
When
all
the truth
hope
is found to be lies.
Is that White Rabbit?
No. When the truth is
Oh,
found
there it is.
Yeah.
to be lies. Yeah.
And all the hope within you dies. And the Jefferson Airplane go, don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? But the rabbi has a different gloss. He uses those lines, but then instead of talking about love, he says, so what then? So that's exactly my question. And it's just in order to emphasize that the person beyond labels cannot be rated. That the worth of the person does not exist. There's no such thing as the worth of a person. That categorizable experiences, abilities, skills, etc. can be rated. Yes, we can rate people. We can and do and will rate people in relation to beauty, intelligence, etc., etc., etc. And what I'm arguing is that this should have nothing to do with the question of how much people deserve to live. That, as I put it before, that the notion of worth should not be confused with the notion of excellence. Now, do you see how the structural differential in our practice, with the structural differential and other general semantic formulations, makes it easier to appreciate this argument than it would be another one? That it takes the argument, at least to some extent, out of the realm of blah blah, and I say, you say, in which it would have been, I think, trapped, at least more so, otherwise. And I'm sure you'll find many other examples of this. So I'm going to move on to the task. Okay, but before I move on to the task, I bring back to your memory the practice of following your breath. So I mentioned it once. I mentioned it once when we were talking about silent practice. And although I didn't assign a task involved following the breath, I did talk about it as a practice that you could take up. So you could just follow the breath as a way of doing silent practice at the object level. So at the object level, if I'm following the breath, here is the breath. I can feel it, and I can hear it, and you can see it and hear it to some extent. I'm following the breath. And here I say, what I say about it is that I'm following the breath. Well, that's sort of ordinary descriptive English. It's at one of the very lowest of the label levels. Let's call it label level 1. We're not going to argue much about that. There's not much room for argument there. If I go, etc., and I say I'm following the breath, no one's going to say, no, you're not following. Now, the second time that I talked about following the breath was in connection with this matter of the multi-ordinal levels of self. And I said that if you do this practice of following the breath, that you can say to yourself that what you're doing there is experiencing the feeling of the existence, the feeling of self-existence of this self here beyond concepts or something like that. more beautifully expressed last time, so I remember. So here it's about the person beyond concepts. Now, this formulation, this idea of a person beyond concepts, is a very highly abstract concept. There's nothing paradoxical about it. It just is the case that if I say that when I follow my breath, what I'm doing is getting in touch with the feeling of the existence of this self here beyond all concepts, you could argue with me. You could say, no, you're not. You're doing something else. You're indulging in blah, blah, or something like that. So it's arguable. However, even though it is arguable, I am recommending it. So take it down into the event level, into the content. So if you do that, you are actually practicing a certain construction of self, which is more of a contribution to sanity, I suggest, than merely saying to yourself, I'm following my breath. If I go, I'm following my breath, that's fine. I can combine that, I think, with great degrees of insanity. If I say that I'm here experiencing the self beyond concepts, myself beyond concepts, I'm actually constructing a particular kind of self that is less unseen than the kind of self that does not have access to this kind of practice. I almost said praxis. Yes. And there's lots of other things that could be said. There's lots of other things that are being said about meditative practices like that, but some of them are totally off the wall. They're being said at very high levels of abstraction. They're extremely arguable. Like, for example, some people might tell me that when I'm following my breath, I'm communicating with God. All right, fine, okay, maybe, let's talk about it. But I'm recommending here this one, and especially as an introduction to the next task. Is there any question? I mean, if we take this stuff seriously, I can't go around saying simply, I'm now in touch with myself as a person beyond concepts. What I can say is, what I am now saying is that I am in touch with myself as a person beyond concepts. It's something that I'm saying, thinking to myself. It's not a simple fact. It depends on that. It's this kind of thing rather than this kind of thing. If you remember the way I used those signs. Sure you got no question? Okay, let me hand out these tasks. If you think of a question as I'm handing out the tasks, that's okay. By the way, today might be a day for you to see if you can seize an opportunity somehow to raise whatever kind of question might have been bugging you. I'm going to go through this with you. It's very, very weird. It's very weird. Please don't show it to any of my colleagues. I might think I'm less worthy of existence than before this, or at least of being allowed to hold forth within these hallowed halls. So this is discovering the person beyond labels. You identify four persons. One whom you know very well. I should have said one whom you think you know very well. Precise. And three others, a young person, a middle-aged person, and an old person. Now, most of the work and most of the writing up of the task will just refer to one of those persons that you've chosen. But I'd like you to carry out the sort of behavioral part of the task with all four. And here are your instructions. Instructions for the task. Focus your attention with great interest on the person for at least 2 full minutes. Give all of your attention to looking, listening, and feeling this person. So you're looking at the person and you'll see things you don't usually see because it's silent practice. You'll hear things if there's anything to be heard that you wouldn't ordinarily hear because it's silent practice. And you'll feel the person too. I don't mean with your hands or any other part of your body because we don't want you to run afoul of the law. I mean in the sense of felt sense. And I guess you could say to something, can I just run my hands in? No, we're talking about getting a felt sense of a person. Notice what the feeling is like in your body as you look and listen to that. Because I think that's, although we don't pay much attention to it, an important aspect of our experience of the object level and especially maybe of others, of other human beings. Notice what comes to mind about the person. Stop and think to yourself. Now, I didn't dare write this kind of thing, but at about the time I was concocting this task, I came across some Tibetan Buddhist meditation instructions that actually tell you what to think. It goes on, some of them will go on for maybe 2-3 pages. Think that you are this and think that you are that. Think that in the past life, and think that in the future life, and think. But so this is really quite modest compared to what it could be. These are instructions on what to think. Now, you don't have to believe it, just think it. So you think to yourself, for purposes of this task, these thoughts are irrelevant. I'm telling you to stop thinking about the person, stop the thoughts that come to mind about the person, and instead of having those thoughts, have these thoughts. For purposes of this task, those thoughts are irrelevant, no matter how proper they may be. They may be very proper. I don't care, like as I've said before, I don't care if the thoughts are proper or not. What I'm concerned with here is the fact that they are thoughts, not whether they're improper or proper thoughts. Let's say you've chosen Adolf Hitler for this task. It's not very easy. I mean, the stranger. I guess he would be very old now. Better make him middle-aged. It's too easy to let old people off the hook. So you say to yourself, for purpose of this task, these thoughts are irrelevant. He's a mass murderer, etc., etc., etc. For purposes of this task, these thoughts are irrelevant. No matter how proper they may be, this person is somebody. Is somebody. A singular, living, breathing human being. Notice how I've hyphenated all those terms. And it's actually seemed appropriate. A singular, living, breathing human being. Much, much larger than the labels, roles, identities, and narratives, etc., which the person contains. A vast texture of aliveness. Whoever I think this person is not this person, even if the thoughts are proper, even if the thoughts are valid and proper and correct. Whoever I think this person is not this person. Well, let's dig down to that image. That's the one I took from Albert Ellis. Slightly revised. So here's the person at the event. That's beyond, outside the skin. We can say the person exists outside the skin. It's the person as the event level. So it's the person as a manifestation of the world. So it's Adolf Hitler as world, or the world as Adolf Hitler. Remember the book by Watts that I recommended to you, Alan Watts, called On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are? I recommend it to you, and to your teenage siblings especially. Watts wrote many other books, so I don't know if necessarily this quote is from that book. But Watts is discussing a cat, and that's a noun. And he says, actually, we should do away with nouns. We should have event, process, happening words instead. So what we're seeing when we look at a cat is a catting. It's a happening. And he asks, and what is it that is catting? The entire cosmos is catting. The entire cosmos is producing this cat. The entire cosmos is producing. And then at the object level, we have the person. And then in here, the roles and the activities in role. So roles. Führer. And then there's various activities involved in playing the role of Führer. Ending unemployment, taking back the Rhineland, building up a magnificent army, reviving German culture,
Autobahn.
the Autobahn, the Volkswagen,
Murdering Jews.
Hitler's achievements. We already know too much about that. Not enough about the other things. Maybe I can say that because I personally had no relatives who died in the Holocaust. Do you know why? Because they were already in Palestine. They'd been there since the 17th century. So it's about the event is not the object, is not the label. If we're going to take it seriously, we have to take it seriously all the time. So that's an exception to the principle of non-allness. We've got to take the principle of non-allness seriously all the time. It's not a paradox because the two statements are two different levels. All right, well, the rest of the diagram is sort of self-explanatory. And then up a line, I say, think also. Now, what I'm telling you to think also there is, I mean, it's funny because you've got to walk around with this to remind you what to think, I guess, as you look at the person, but you could memorize it first or something. Well, it's okay, you'll work it out, how to do the task. And this is directly from Tibetan Buddhist meditation. One of the Tibetan Buddhist meditations, sometimes it's called an equality. Meditation, an equality. And sometimes I think maybe it comes under the rubric of compassion. This person does not want to suffer. So as you look at the person, you think those thoughts that I was prescribing. And you also think this person does not want to suffer. This person wants to be happy. We can say that about any person, I think. One year I got a little argument from a student in this course about that. He was saying that some people do want to suffer. And so I was treating them unequally. And I won't burden you with how the argument developed, but we settled it to our mutual satisfaction. This person does not want to suffer. So if this person's happiness includes some suffering for one reason or another, hey, we can include that within the location. And then down here, come out of the box, continuously come back to focus on the person and on the prescribed thoughts for at least 2 full minutes. So I'm saying, I set it up here and I say it down here again, at least 2 full minutes. Of course, it could take longer, but it's 2 minutes. What's 2 minutes when a person is at stake? 2 minutes. 2 minutes for the person. And as a report of this task, as a report on this task, write a brief description in ordinary descriptive English of the persons, 4 persons. So we have 4 ordinary descriptive English descriptions of the person, same as in the observed person task. Then simply copy the instructions. Now, this is really, unacceptable, isn't it? To ask you to simply copy, well, that's what scholars did for 2,000 years. They sat and copied. So it's really not so terrible. pretend you're a scribe in the Middle Ages. Somehow you're getting instructions from Korzybski in the future. So you simply copy out these instructions, including the diagram, precisely, filling in their name if you know it, instead of person. See, here we have person at the event level, person at the object level, and here more or less correct narratives about the person at the label level. So just pick one person to copy it all out for. Don't copy it all out for all four persons. I'm not satisfied. Pick one of the persons and copy out the diagram for them, putting in their name here instead of person. For example, Michael and Matthew. Oh no, we're working with them today, right? Okay, we can change at any time. Michael Ignatieff at the event level, Michael Ignatieff at the object level, Michael Ignatieff at the label level. Just one selected person.
You know, I think he really does want to suffer.
Sorry?
I think Ignatieff actually does want to suffer.
Well, we can take that into account. And finally, write a paragraph commenting on the entire experience and how it made you think, feel. Here's something that'll help you with the task. Thank God for these notes. This will help you with the task. I mean, if you're doing it for someone who's really quite amazingly despicable, who you think is the worst person in the world. But remember, there's no exception. So this might help you to do it for the worst. It's easy to do it for the best. The challenge is to do it for the worst. It's like Derrida says about forgiveness. You know what Jacques Derrida says about forgiveness? To forgive something that is forgivable is no big deal. It's to forgive something that is unforgivable. That is the true forgiveness. But we're not about forgiving here. Although there could be a connection. So, here's something else that you can think. I didn't write it down, but I can tell you that. Think that if you had been born to this, think that if you had been conceived by this person's parents, and with the same chromosomes, and that your experiences in the womb had been exactly the same as this person's experiences in the womb, and that your experiences after birth were exactly the same as this person's experiences after birth, and in the same sequence. Sequence is very important. What happens first? The contingency of what happens to happen first and what happens to happen next can be very important. So think, if you had been conceived by his parents or her parents and with the same chromosomes and had the same fetal experiences and then the same experiences, I should say, at birth, because some people think that the experiences during the actual birth process are very important. Did you know that? And the experiences after birth and in the same sequence, well then, given all that, you would be that person. Among the uses of this, I guess we could call it this little meditation, among the uses of it are, by the way, this I think is what Christians mean when we say, there but for the grace of God go I. Now, you may have heard a Christian say that, there but for the grace of God go I. I think very often it's not said with the appropriate emotional valence. It's actually said as part of a condemnation. Whereas actually it's supposed to be the opposite. But that's what we're saying here. There, but for the grace of God, go on. Well, what is the grace of God? Very often we're told not to judge a person until you have walked a mile in his shoes, or her shoes, or his or her moccasins, as the case may be. Or you're challenged to ask what you would do in that person's situation. Well, here we go far beyond such mealy-mouthed compromises. Because if you ask yourself what I would do, let's say it's about torture. And somebody has under torture, given out the names of all of your friends and relatives. They're captured and executed in the most horrible manner. And in the midst of your rage and grief, you ask yourself, but then what would I have done in his place? And well, then it's up to you to decide what you would have done in his place, and you could decide that you would never have severely hurt. In other words, you're leaving yourself an out. You still have some degree of separation there between you and the other. So this is not about a sort of more reasonable way of judging the other. It's about judging the other as himself. So when the good book talks about loving your neighbor as yourself, again, it's just meaningless sound, yes, to most of us, and we equate it to a very large extent with pious hypocrisy, with impossible pious hypocrisy. But this is not impossible. We just did it. It's not impossible, and it's not pious, and it's not hypocrisy. This is, I think, the really deep meaning of those religious notions in a way that is suitable for a modern or postmodern intelligence. And that should help you to see a person beyond words. If you can see the person as yourself. That would have been you if all those conditions had been in place. Now, some of you may be thinking, this is a meaningless tautology. Right on, that's exactly what it is. It's a meaningful tautology, not a meaningless tautology. But it is a tautology. Just get that. A tautology means to restate something in different terms as though the different terms made a difference. Well, in this case, they do. So I guess we can go back to Winston Smith. Particularly doesn't call him Winston Smith, we just call him Smith, but for me he's become Winston Smith. Okay, Winston Smith. So with the index, we go Winston Smith 1 is not the same as Winston Smith 2. Now, I take that, if we were to do that with the index, apply it to yourself. Albert Gaudio 1 is not the same as Albert Gaudio 2. I think that those would be different roles. Albert Gaudio, the photographer, is not the same as Albert Gaudio,
Not the same as Albert Gaudio
the
either.
law student. That too. We can get down into really fine differences. And here we have the date. Smith in the womb is not the same as Smith at the age of 3, is not the same as Smith at the age of sweet 16, is not the same as Smith at sweet 60, is not the same as Smith moribund. And you know, there is no Smith. There is no essential or fundamental Smith behind Smith's 1, 2, 3, etc., where Smith did. When you're using the devices then from the perspective of each device, it's important to try to get that they're not qualifications of an essence. There is no essence. And then we get W. Smith and the chain index. So let's say Smith at the age of 6 in the sandbox is not the same as Smith at the age of 6 in the choir. It's not the same as Smith at the age of 6 playing very junior league hockey in so and so contexts. Bringing the context directly into the definition of the self. Bringing temporality directly into the definition of the self. Bringing singularity or multiplicity or something like that directly into the definition of the self. And then we get Smith, etc. And that's, I think, getting closer to what we were talking about today. Because when we were working with the etc., we got to the point of saying that no matter how many roles or whatever like that, categories, classifications, we could fit Smith into, we could never fit him into anything like even the most complete possible set of classifications. So there we get the person beyond labels with that level of the etc. There's actually two levels of the etc. There's all the different classifications into which we could fit Smith, possibly, and no matter how many we got, there could always be more. And then even beyond that, we've got Smith at the object level, which is not going to fit into any set of classifications that are complete. So that's what we were dealing with today, Smith at the object. And then we could put Smith in quotes. And that relates to Smith at the event level. Because there is no Smith. There is no instant Smith. Apart from all of the whatever, all of the relations, all of the causes, etc., which manifest at a particular point in space-time as Winston Smith. So that's about Smith at the event level. That's where he's the world, or the cosmos. And what we were doing today, I said, it has something to do with this, and also something to do with this, and also something to do with the multi-ordinal index. Because we could say Smith at the event level is not the same as Smith. The object level is not the same as Smith at the label level. So those are multi-ordinal index. Those are hierarchically arranged. They're not on a line as this one is. Because the event contains the object, which contains the order. So it's multi-ordinal rather than linear. Sailor, doctor, tinker, priest, all in the same line. So in connection with that, and I was going to give you this when we were talking about quotes and hyphens, but I thought I didn't have time. So I'll just give it to you today. And maybe it can help with those of you who are going to work more on that task for quotes and hyphens. This takes off from a famous psychiatrist of the 40s and 50s in the States, now totally forgotten by historians of psychiatry. Harry Stack. I don't even have to ask if anyone's heard of it, because no one has. I think it was in one of the mental institutions in the northeast of the United States that were associated with this brand of psychiatry that Korzybski spent a while working with mental patients. Talk about getting out of the ivory tower. I don't have the source for the quote anyway, but this is how Sullivan created a brand of psychiatry called interpersonal psychiatry. Okay? He thought psychiatry was an elementalistic science for many reasons, and among them that it just looked inside a person, but it didn't look at the relations. in which the person was embedded. So he invented an interpersonal psychiatry. And, sometimes maybe there was even a hyphen in there. Inter and person, interpersonal psychiatry. And this is how he defines personality. We've got it in quotes. So when Sullivan puts personality in quotes, we know that he knows what he is doing, even if he's not consciously using the general semantic phrase. When he puts personality in quotes, he means to say, and I'm going to tell you exactly what he said. He said that he defines personality not as a subdermal entity inside a person. In other words, personality can't be located inside a person, inside his skin, subdermal, inside his skin. Rather, it refers to relatively enduring patterns of recurrent interpersonal situations which characterize a human life. So he's saying the psychiatrist has to look especially at the recurring, over time, they happen over and over and over again, patterns of relationship among persons, including the person under study, patterns of recurrent interpersonal situations which characterize a human life. That's what you're looking at. That's what you want to be looking at in order to look at personality more sanely. So, more or less condemning psychiatry as unsane. No, he says, large numbers of people and things are involved in a personality. And again, personality is in quotes. Large numbers of people and things are involved in a personality. I find it very interesting that he talks about things also. Large numbers of people and things are involved in a personality. For example, when we look into a personality today, we may find a laptop. Right? Or something like that. So it goes beyond interpersonal, actually. Unless that you have a nickname for the laptop. Okay. Yeah, there you go. For sure. No individual can be separated out for separate study. We should stop trying to study individuals, to separate them out of their lives and study what the chemical imbalance in their brain or whatever, their Oedipus complex or whatever. No individual can be separated out for separate study, for each emerges out of patterns of interaction. Each emerges out of patterns of interaction. He's almost on the tip here of using the Mobius. So on one side, we've got patterns of interaction, and on the other side, we have a person that emerges out of patterns of interaction. The more you look at those patterns of interaction, the more you see the person. The more you look at the person, the more you see patterns of interaction. Without that, he says, the individual is not much more than $20 worth of chemicals. Well, that's probably more like $500 worth of chemicals today. So people have increased in value.
And as we go toward increasing water scarcity,
Yeah.
you become your own best investment.
Okay. Now, as a coincidence, sent directly from the Office of Coincidence Control as I was working on this a few years ago, I came across something by a Tibetan Buddhist. Don't know anything about him. I just saved this quotation. I just have his name. A Tibetan Buddhist scholar, I think, gone, departed, who said, and I quote, "Whenever I zero in on my own mind, I find myriads of other beings and things." Okay, so whenever I zero in on my own mind, I find myriads of other persons and things, other beings and things, humans, animals, and things. So I found it remarkable that both Sullivan and Wang Cheng-Pa, separated maybe by 1,000 years, used the identical formulation, or almost identical, persons and things. what could these things be? Well, technologies, genes. Genes are things, other things inside us. Atoms. Atoms are inside, and outside. There's no place that is empty from atoms. And then that led me to, so it's like Longchenpa Pakar said, the more I zero in on my own mind, the more I find myriads of other beings and things. And then on the other side, and the more I zero in on those beings and things, the more I find my own mind. And, as a climax here, I got a quote from the poet of democracy. Who is the poet of democracy? Whitman. Yeah, Walt Whitman. Who else would be? Any other nominations?
Pablo Neruda?
H.L. Mencken.
Pablo Neruda.
Poet of democracy? I don't know enough about him.
No.
Did you say something?
H.L. Mencken.
Poet?
Pericles?
Who?
Pericles?
Any class? I don't know. Maybe. Okay, well, this is what Walt Whitman said. He said, for every atom that belongs to me, as good as belongs to you. And that's a statement that refers to the event level, because he's talking about atoms. And Whitman was saying this long before any kind of contemporary physics, science, physics, understanding of atoms. For every atom that belongs to me, as good as belongs to you. All right, well, if that applies to Whitman and to me, then it also applies, and it must also apply, just simple Aristotelian deductive logic, it must also apply to Hitler, Charles Manson. How do you like Paul Bernardo? Paul Bernardo currently spending 23 hours a day in solitary confinement for the rest of his life. Would it be nicer to kill him? Wouldn't it? To execute him? I don't see what all the fuss is about capital punishment. Actual capital punishment would be quite merciful compared to some of our other practices of retribution.